Hello, and welcome to another edition of Heavy Hands. I am your host, Connor. That guy over there, you know who it is. It's Mr. Phil.
Yo.
And I hate to do this, Phil. I like to start us off. Of course, we're talking about UFC 312. Everybody knows that. I like to start us off with enthusiasm and confidence. You know, a little confidence, but I got to start this one off with an apology. People were there was some serious backlash, particularly to you and I, saying that we enjoyed a fight like MVP Shara Bullet more than we enjoy a fight like Pennington Pena. I mean Duplessis Strickland.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, "That's a way better fight. It had way more action, and you need a mental health evaluation." That's what it. I mean, it got so far that that people were saying that they think we only make that pick because we think we're better than them, which is certainly not indicative of any kind of deep-seated insecurity on your part. That you can't hear a dissenting opinion without thinking, "Well, you think you're better than me?" But I have to apologize. Duplessis Strickland was incredible. I mean, absolute, the heart and determination displayed by Sean Strickland to continue standing there, even after having his nose ripped off his face, to come back out in the next round and stand there some more with half his nose off of his face. And given that it was, as we kind of expected, more or less identical in form to their first fight, that means I have to retcon and say that, Duplessis Strickland 1 was also a great fight because it was literally indistinguishable from this one, except that Sean Strickland did even worse.
Yep. Yes, those were two bangers which are going to go down in history.
Close the polls. Fight of the year. Yep. I know it's only February 11th, but it's been decided. The race is over. No, I guess this is how I like to start off the show, is with some sort of very thinly veiled sarcasm. Seriously, guys, those of you who, I get it, Phil. I get it why people would enjoy a fight like Duplessis Strickland more than MVP Shara Bullet. And I don't think we made it. I don't think we ever put our foot down and said MVP Shara Bullet was a good fight. In fact, I think we explicitly said it was a bad fight. But that we got more of a connection to the story that happened in that fight than the likes of Duplessis Strickland. If all you care about is seeing guys hit each other in the face, and that's a very condescending way to frame this. If that's your metric for what makes a fight good, then totally. DDP Strickland, enjoy that more. For us personally though, Phil, which is all we were saying, these fights just fucking go nowhere. It's just 25 minutes of no progression, no notable, momentum swings, no back and forth. It's like, it is like watching Rock'em Sock'em Robots. That's such a played out comparison. And usually it implies a really cool knockdown, drag out brawl. But no, I literally mean you know how the robots can only move forward so far? And then they have to jerk back when they make contact, and they just sort of throw punches blind. I mean, literally, it feels like the game Rock'em Sock'em Robots. Which, by the way, sucks. Terrible fucking game. Not good.
Yep. Yeah, it wasn't great. And I think we all expect that by this point.
It's the fact that it's a Duplessis really fight too.
What's that?
It's the fact that it's a Duplessis fight too. I mean, that's the thing. That's the bar I'm measuring it against. His fights are awesome. Except when he fights Sean Strickland.
Yeah, as I was the question now is who can have a fun fight with Sean Strickland?
Alex Pereira.
Because fun and shot.
Yeah.
So basically, but can anyone have a competitive fight with him that's fun? Maybe Kamzat could, because he'd get super knackered.
Yeah, you might just get some built-in momentum swings there.
Yeah. But this was pretty much as expected, right? Duplessis being the only one who could make an adjustment, and then being the one who made that adjustment.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think the weird thing about this one is that it itself has picked up a sort of patina and a description that it didn't deserve in the same way that like the first fight did, because the first fight got this unwarranted description as like being really good and like a amazing war and all this other kind of stuff. This fight has gotten the description of being like domination, just like a complete shutout.
Yeah,
and it wasn't even that.
Nope.
It wasn't even the we've kind of encountered this when we've gone back to watch fights on the Depressed Us, when we've gone to look back to see like great fighters in what were considered to be actually like pretty mediocre performances.
Yeah, we just rewatched Khabib Iaquinta recently, and we were stunned to discover that it is in fact a pretty masterful striking performance from Khabib.
Yeah, it's just a sensational, you just know you are watching a sensationally good fight.
It is truly dominant. Like, I mean, it is a dominant win. Yeah.
It's an absolute shutout, whilst Joe Rogan talks about how worrying it is that he's spending so much time on the feet and, you know, I don't know, Iaquinta's really in this fight and all this other kind of stuff. But no, you watch it and you're like, this is masterful stuff. This wasn't even like a masterful shutout. It was just Duplessis making the right adjustment and, but still being, hampered enough by sucking, that he wasn't able to like convert it long term. And because, Strickland is not going to put himself into danger. In any way.
Strickland is
just a defense first fighter.
A defensively sound fighter at the cost of his own offense. I mean, not to just give some free ammo to these guys think they're better than us crowd, but I feel pretty good about how I called both of these title fights, if I'm honest. And this in particular, I guess I shouldn't feel very good because I think it's a very straightforward dynamic once you sit down to think about it. And what we said last week is that Sean Strickland is actually really well put together to make Duplessis look bad. Because he's really hard to crack with like that initial shot. His defense, he parries, he catches, he gets behind his shoulder. He does whatever he has to do not to just get touched with that first shot. And Duplessis is a brute force combination striker, not somebody who like grabs a little tempo and then slides into a better position and follows up with 3 sharp follow-ups. And so, it very quickly develops the same feeling as the last fight where he just tries to force his way in through the front door. And Strickland is exactly the guy in this division who will see that coming and will just get out of the way most of the time. You have to trick him or surprise him. And Duplessis obviously is capable of doing that. It's the reason he won. He was able to get in the meaningful shots when it mattered. But it just had this feeling of a guy. It was like watching somebody try to shoulder barge a front door open for 25 minutes straight. Back up, run into the door. Okay, not that time, but next time, all right, I'm going to back up again, run into the door. You know what I mean? Like, it very quickly, the reason it feels like this is because it's precisely because of who Sean Strickland is, that, as I said, all of this defensive acumen is at the cost of his own offense. Sean Strickland can barely counterpunch. If he could counterpunch, this would be a totally different matchup against Duplessis. It would, seriously, if he could throw one good counterpunch, not even a combo, one good counter right hand, even a counter jab every 5th time that he managed to defend a Duplessis attack, it would radically change the look and the tenor of this fight. But he can't. He just goes defensive and he puts himself out of position. And It's also a peculiarity of the fact that so much of his defense is reliant on his hands. That is one of the drawbacks. If you're catching and parrying and blocking everything, your hands are busy defending when they are supposed to be free to attack and to counter.
Yep.
And so, yeah, he's just like, he makes himself a wall that Duplessis runs into without much effect, but he is just a wall at the end of the day in this matchup where all he can do is neutralize Duplessis, and he can't ever neutralize him completely. And so, yes, this was a more convincing fight than their first one, but dominant? Did it look like Duplessis had the master plan to beat Sean Strickland? I would say strongly that it did not.
I think both men did make adjustments within their skill sets. And Duplessis' one obviously ended up being better because he can just change more. And that was essentially why we picked him and why we were right to do so. So, I mean, I think firstly, Masvidal, what am I saying? This is going to be a point I'm going to get to later. Firstly, Strickland made the adjustment that he wasn't going to panic and swing with Duplessis. And I don't think that was necessarily in and of itself a bad call. It was like, I'm going to jab even more with him, because one of the reasons why that fight got out of control the last time is that he got spooked by Duplessis swinging at him, and he tried to chase him out of the pocket. And, you know, one of the many, many MMA fighters who completely loses form the minute they start moving their feet.
Yep.
And he just started, you know, swinging bungalows, and it turned into an incredibly stupid fight where they're both just constantly bouncing their forearms off the top of each other's heads.
Yeah.
So I think he basically made the decision to just jab more and stay within himself, and then eventually he would be able to simply get ahead on efficiency and bloody Duplessis up, and and rely on his defense to preserve him from what Duplessis was throwing at him. And I think Duplessis' adjustment was a smarter one that sort of goes to the core of who Strickland is a bit more. Because Strickland is that guy who has built his approach based on, and who has built his success based on MMA fighters' allergy to the pocket. We mentioned this in the Izzy fight. But he basically just walks forward, and he walks into a zone which MMA fighters do not like to be in.
Yeah.
They are very scared of what is going to happen to them, and very tense around what is going to happen to them.
Yeah.
In that space, and they try and swing at him, and he just swats it away. And they start feeling like their strikes aren't working. So they start backpedaling, and they start freaking out. And then he lands 1, 2, 3 jabs, and they're bloodied up, and they start to panic. And eventually they get used to it because he's very monotone.
Mm-hmm.
But, by that point, they're kind of knackered. He's probably kind of knackered too.
Mm-hmm.
But it's that mental pressure of him walking into that sort of, that little zone of uncomfortableness.
Sean Strickland breaks people. That's what he does. He breaks you.
And Joe Rogan really has been so bad for so long. Watching that Khabib fight really brought it back.
Yep. It's been a fucking decade now that he's been this guy.
Yeah. Dricus was able to sort of withstand it because Dricus gets incredibly uncomfortable and freaked out, and in every fight, and simply has basically unbreakable, mental fortitude.
Yep.
But it's still meant for an incredibly ugly fight. So his adaptation in this one was interesting because, I was thinking, if he's going to adapt, he should just learn that Sean Strickland's bad on the back foot. He should just force him back, follow up combinations with kicks, and, build up an attritional lead. And that wasn't the case. But what he just did is that he just stood there and or backed up, and as Strickland walked into him, as the outer layer of, the pocket, he just spammed attacks at him.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't matter if they landed or not. And Strickland would try and block it, or parry it, or, step back out of range. And then he would step back, and he would try and walk in again, and Dricus would just spam something at him again. And I don't necessarily want to, downplay this from what Dricus accomplished kind of perspective, because to do that requires an immense amount of mental and physical stamina.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have to just throw different stuff at the other person the entire time. Because even Sean Strickland's going to counter you if you just do the same thing whenever he steps in.
Eventually.
But Dricus kept mixing it up. And just never let Sean Strickland stand inside. And his, accuracy was pretty terrible. And he didn't do all that much damage until later on in the fight. And he didn't blitz in, didn't open himself up. Mm-hmm. Just whenever Strickland stepped in, he just threw something at him that made him step back out again. And the comparator for this is a technically inferior fighter essentially doing this to a quote unquote better technician, which is, very true in many senses, is Ben Henderson against Jorge Masvidal.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty much exactly the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Masvidal's just like a better striker. And Bendo just waits for him to get in the pocket, get close to the pocket, and then just forces him back out of him by throwing weird stuff at him. And Masvidal never gets his feet in the fight. Yeah.
I mean, what you're describing is, I think, and this is I have a slightly different view of what Dricus had in mind for this fight, but slightly, because what you're describing is essentially just a crude version of what we in the business call boxing, where you sort of control the space with your hands and with your threats. And you don't jump out of range every time anything happens. If anything, I think Dricus borrowed something from Strickland for this fight. I think he wanted to, if not win, then stake a serious claim to the jab battle. He wanted to parry.
That too, definitely. He definitely trained some actual jab counters.
Yeah, catch and pitch jab counters. He wanted to parry the jab and respond with his own jab or with his left hook. And he wanted to take an awkward sort of knock-kneed step to the side. This was Dricus doing boxing. And it really reinforces one of the other points we made, not only last week, but virtually every time Sean Strickland has fought in the last 5 years, that Strickland will never pressure if you don't let him. Because this was a fight in which Dricus was not on the front foot for most of it. Or at least for long stretches, especially at the beginning.
Yeah.
But he was not being driven back. Sean Strickland was not taking advantage of the lack of pressure. So it's even when Dricus was not pressuring him, Sean still did not have the wherewithal or the technical know-how, perhaps, to actually force Dricus to concede and to give ground.
Yeah, it's because, like I said, he's just one of the many fighters, Chito Vera or whatever, who just cannot move his feet and throw.
Yeah.
And, whatever else you can say about Dricus, he's willing to do that.
Yeah.
But,
yes.
And so much of, you can see that Strickland's, style has been built around that. It's the teep. It's not just the teep. It's his ability to, as one of his ways of closing distance. It's his ways, it's so that he can lift his foot up and step in. Because other than that, he does not want to step in when he's moving. He just wants to be standing in the pocket with people.
Yep.
He does not have any actual way to get there. Because once he does, as we've seen, he is just, a looping haymaker machine who looks like he's never, he's never trained a day in his life.
Yep.
As soon as he has to move his feet and throw, and so Dricus just kind of kept him just outside the range where he could throw just by throwing at him.
Yep.
Mostly ineffectually.
Yep. But I mean, ineffectually shot for shot, but
yeah, of course.
As a strategic framework, extremely effective because Sean Strickland was never able to get comfortable.
Volkanovski as well, executed at a much, much higher level. It's not hugely meaningful scoring offense, but it is scoring offense.
Yeah. If anybody controlled any part of this fight, it was Dricus. And yeah, he wasn't able to he didn't really try to build a lot of pressure until he had Sean Strickland hurting. He wasn't able to get in with the vast majority of his shots, but his willingness to stand there to meet Sean Strickland's jab, with defense and counters, it just meant that Sean Strickland had no idea how to win the entire fight. So it certainly felt more, I would never say dominant about this because it looked like Dricus was struggling the entire time, but
convincing,
much more convincing because there was only one guy in this fight who clearly had no idea how to win. And, in the last fight, that's kind of how it felt for both of them. So yeah, I don't know, folks, I think if we hadn't said that we got something out of MVP Charbullet, anybody would have really got up in arms. Well, some people still would have got up in arms. How dare you? Sean Strickland is a warrior and all this, but, I don't know, folks. I don't think I needed to see this one again. I don't think this enriched my MMA fan experience in any way. In fact, I think it was a huge waste of time.
Yeah. It made me a little sad to watch it. I did feel Sean Strickland a bit because he's, I think for him this kind of that his style is increasingly like his safe space.
Yeah,
he's obviously like a very anxious
guy
in his own way, and he's constantly like worried about the violence in the world that's coming his way and whether he needs to shoot people or cut them off in traffic or whatever. And this way in which he can kind of stand here and just swat punches away and, be in the fight, but be completely neutralizing it and sort of diverting it away from him.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is one of the places where he can feel at peace. But the problem is that Dricus isn't there to do that. Dricus is there to win a fight.
Mm-hmm.
He's there to win a fight and to take advantages of any of the flaws of that particular style.
Mm-hmm.
And that was exactly what he did. And yeah, it just felt like watching Sean Strickland. This one just felt like watching the frog down the well. It's like he never will change. I think it's too important to who he is as a person to have this fighting style.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Being in Sean Strickland's corner and telling him to do something different, begging him to do something different, it feels exactly the same as being in Tyron Woodley's corner.
Yep.
Does not matter what you say. You cannot shake this guy out of the one way he knows how to fight.
Yep. Doesn't matter what I would imagine it also doesn't matter what they trained.
No.
I'm sure Nick Sick trained more stuff than this with Strickland, but when it comes down to it, he just goes back to the safe place. He just retreats back to what he knows almost immediately.
Yeah, I don't know if you're saying safe place deliberately to trigger Sean Strickland fanboys. I would say comfort zone. He retreats to his comfort zone. So yep, the fight happened.
Yep.
Whether it needed
I guess we get.
What'll be?
I guess we get Hamzat Dricus next, assuming they can get
him in the cage.
Hamzat into the States, yeah,
or that, yeah,
or whatever. They just assume that.
Yeah, people were talking about
one of these guys can have fights outside of the US, and they just have a title fight. Just have a title fight outside the US, and just defer the problem for the time being.
People were talking about Bilal Muhammad fighting Dricus. I mean, I don't.
What?
I know.
He is not a big welterweight.
No. At least
would throw him on his head.
At least Bilal was talking about it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Belal says a lot of... I like Belal. He says a lot of things.
You know, say one thing for Bilal Muhammad, an advantage he would have over every other person who's fought Dricus. He game plans better than Dricus. He game plans better than Dricus does.
Yes, that is true.
And Dricus's game planning is like, you know, the pieces of the game plan are routinely like some of the shittiest technique you've ever seen, and he's just so wide open to be punished. I mean, like, when I need people to understand this, when we're talking about how Dricus's technique is bad, yeah, I recognize, and I said this in a YouTube comments a few weeks ago, like, the number of times in my fight discussing career, I suppose, my analysis career, that I have had to relearn the lesson that technique is frequently not even close to the most important thing in a fight, is that number is too high to count. So, like, I'm aware this is a bias of mine, but I need to be clear that we're not just talking about aesthetics when we talk about how bad Dricus's technique is. A guy with Sean Strickland's jab should have been able to run Dricus into that shot a million times. If he was able to, say, pivot and keep his left hand between himself and his opponent while changing angle, how many of those Dricus attacks are just wide open for just a simple straight shot down the middle? You should be able to control this guy, at least in that way. And he's going to try some crazy shit after that, and he's going to be awkward and weird. And yes, Dricus has things that go beyond technique in importance that make his game work. But there are technical problems here that are there to be technically exploited. And his opponents are not doing it. They just don't know how to, like, he is the picture of a guy that should be beaten by somebody with fundamentals. That's the kind of guy who needs to beat Dricus. Somebody with really good fundamentals, unwaveringly good fundamentals. And there just aren't any of them. Not in Dricus's division.
Who's the best chance at the moment? Is it Nasruddin Imavov?
Yeah, right. You know?
He has a fundamental.
He does have a fun. He's got straight shots and they're impactful. So there's a chance, but, fucking hell. Is it, it's just hard to try to frame this in the right way. It's not an aesthetic problem that we have. The aesthetics is what I enjoy about Dricus's technique. It's hilarious. I love watching him fumble around and stumble and lose his balance and run headfirst. He straight up, after he broke Strickland's nose, he dislocated it again with his head. I don't know if you caught that.
Yep.
When just like rushing in, missing all three punches and just colliding with Strickland against the fence. He bashed his fucking head into Strickland's nose. Like, you know, that stuff's hard to deal with, but like, look at these combinations he's throwing. Look at his footwork. It's so bad, and it's not just because it looks ugly. It should not be working. And I think middleweights should be a little embarrassed that nobody has even come close to really solving any part of Dricus's game.
Did you see was the Dricus quote real? The one about about footwork.
Oh, yeah, I think it was, but I believe he was being tongue in cheek.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Dricus said something about footwork. Footwork is not important. Don't learn footwork. Just throw punches and move towards the opponent. But I think he was smiling when he said that. He knows that what he's doing is goofy and strange. It just works for him.
Everything you've ever learned about footwork, forget it. Footwork is not important. You start running towards your opponent and throw. Just throw. Whatever he throws, take it, and then throw what you want to throw.
Yeah. He was being a little self-aware when he said that, I believe.
Yeah, I think so.
One of the things that makes Dricus likable, I suppose. He's not so self-deluded as many other MMA fighters.
But yeah, the other thing about this fight is it brought back that he's actually quite quick, which is weird.
Dricus, yeah.
Yeah, like, and I think this is the technique thing again, because he's not actually he's quick in an absolute sense, not in a striking sense, because his technique's so awful.
Yeah.
Like, but his actual movements are very fast. Like, his reactions to things are very quick, but it's just that his reaction to something is just to go, bleh!
Yeah.
And then just like, shamble left incredibly quickly.
Yeah.
So his fist to impact time is not fast because everything is horrendously uncoordinated, but every single part of that uncoordinated motion is actually moving quite quickly.
It's all happening at max speed, but it's an incredibly inefficient machine, so it doesn't really yield the results it should.
Yeah. And as I said, it required incredible cardio to make that, that game plan work against John Strickland. And it did also make me realize that, one of the reasons why Sean Strickland's, style does not just lend itself to any kind of snowball is, I haven't really thought about this, it's because he's got to be one of the few MMA fighters who just isn't on the juice, right? At all.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know how to guess that kind of thing, really.
Sean
Strickland might be on all the juice in the world and just not have a body with a lot of, explosive muscle.
He would find it I think he would just find it, boring and pussy. And he would just be like, I just want to go spar. I don't want to inject myself with this thing.
I would say that seems like a likely call. I wouldn't say with any kind of certainty, but Sean Strickland seems like a guy who probably would not be willing to accept that compromise, even if it was secret.
Yeah. But anyway, Dricus is a physical freak, and it will be interesting. It would be very interesting and potentially very funny to watch him against Kamzat.
Oh yeah, I want to see that. That sounds really stupid.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds great. Yeah.
Yep.
So let us know. Pop off in the comments and on social media. Did you like this one as much as the first one? Did it change your perspective of the first one in any way? I think, it's the Woodley Wonder Boy effect as well. I think Duplessis Strickland's one of those fights where when you're on the edge of your seat and you're invested in who's going to win, then, and this was absolutely the case for us with MVP Char Bullet too, right? We had a vested interest. That's also why we got something more out of that fight. We enjoyed seeing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Char Bullet get suckered by a crafty old man.
Yep.
But if you remove the stakes from this, tell me guys, go back and rewatch both of these fights and tell me if they hold up on a repeat viewing. Cause I have a suspicion this is the kind of fight that, without the drama inherent to what's the result going to be, there's not a lot of other meaningful drama to be found. Anyway, front runner for the Oliveira versus Lentz Award of the year, certainly.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's take a break. And when we come back, a significantly more meaningful and significantly more impressive title fight, Weili Zhang versus Tatiana Suarez, after this. Hey everybody, thanks for listening to this week's Heavy Hands. If you like what you hear, please consider pledging to support the podcast on Patreon. Patreon is basically continuous crowdfunding. You sign up to contribute a certain amount per month to help us with production costs and the like, and in return you get rewards ranging from a mention on the Heavy Hands website to a question or topic of your choice being discussed on the show. We have a lot more in the works to reward you for your help, and we appreciate every contribution. No amount is too small. Just head over to patreon.com and find how you can help out, the only show dedicated to the finer points of face punching. Now let's get back to it. All right. Weili Zhang versus Tatiana Suarez was the co-main event of UFC 312. Did we split on this pick, Phil?
Oh.
It was Zane who split with me.
Yeah.
Zane foolishly took the flyer on Tatiana Suarez. There's some stuff here that I probably should have expected and didn't really take into account. For example, Weili Zhang clearly preparing super hard for the wrestling game and therefore showing much better wrestling than she did in her bout with Rose Namajunas, which, by the way, was... How many years ago was that now? 3-4 years ago?
Yeah, Yeah.
So, counting on Weili Zhang to be well prepared, maybe should have clued me in that some of the concerns about her getting out wrestled were probably overblown. But setting that aside, I feel real good about my call on this one. I'm really, really shocked. I was at the time that Weili Zhang could ever be an underdog to Tatiana Suarez. And my main take was simply that Suarez, despite convincingly beating a lot of good opponents, felt like a fighter who had never actually been tested. Aside from that third round with Nina Nunes, had never, a test which she did not really pass, other than winning the decision. And so I was just kind of mystified that people were having a strong feeling that she could ever win this fight. It was the kind of thing I would, first 5-round fight, the worst person in the division to stack her singular skill set up against, and a fighter who is basically completely clueless everywhere except her one specialized skill set. That is not a fighter that I expect to beat a champion like Weili Zhang over 5 rounds. And that was exactly the dynamic we saw here. This looked like a massive experience edge for Weili Zhang. She could have been much worse prepared than she was and still won this fight because she's been there before. And Tatiana Suarez literally never has. She has never dealt with the kind of pushback which puts her in a position where she might lose the fight, ever. And, when the first time you ever encounter that is your first title shot, this tends to be what happens. Pretty much a shutout for Weili Zhang.
Yeah, this was immensely impressive, and I think, as I said on Twitter, easily the bright spot of this card.
Yeah, oh yeah.
There are some, questions to be had about the quality of the current sort of crop of champions that the UFC has, sort of across the board. But I do think that increasingly you can see that what distinguishes them is, in many ways, is their ability to prepare for opponents.
Mm-hmm.
This is probably the most, it might not be the best collection of champions we've ever seen across the board, but it's definitely one of the most strategically flexible.
That's the thing I wanted to say. The distinction I wanted to make, it's not just being good at preparing, it's being flexible enough to make the necessary preparations. Because, like you said, Sean Strickland was probably very well prepared. I'm sure they drilled all kinds of specific things, but he is not a flexible fighter. He can't change course from what he wants to do.
Yeah.
Fighters like Weili Zhang are exceptionally good at that. She fights like an all-terrain fighter. Oh, this is the best way to win? That's the game plan I'm going to mold myself to. That flexibility is a rare and special quality of hers.
So yeah, we've seen a couple of fights from her where she's kind of leaned on the on the offensive wrestling, as well she should have done. And this one, it was just like a masterclass in how to fight a relatively one-dimensional wrestler.
Yep.
She just had very specific counters locked in. She was constantly throwing the short uppercut or the hook whenever Suarez shot in. She was throwing tons of transitional offense. When she got taken down, she was constantly attacking. And was also working to sweep or stand up as quickly as possible. She converted botched takedowns into her own takedown offense. Yeah, she was just attacking every possible, and her takedown defense, she got taken down early, and then after that just
never again
sealed it up, and it just never happened again.
Yep.
And it just ended up being, damage and exhaustion from Suarez. So yeah, I mean, this is one of the ones people should watch this one.
Yes.
If they're going up against a wrestler, they should be oh, this is how you do it.
This is a great blueprint for a fighter like Tatiana Suarez. Pretty much ideal, I would almost say. Yeah, I thought Weili really, really shined in moments of transition as well. This is always a clear advantage to have over somebody who is as singular in their skill set as Tatiana Suarez. But as the fight wore on and we started to get more of these sequences where Suarez was trying to force a shot, something I noted, by the way, she's surprisingly good at making work because of her bizarrely long arms. She can just crash into people and wrap up a leg and mess up their whole defense, or at least force a tie-up that she can then work with. But as the fight wore on and Suarez was trying to force these shots and trying to force the clinches, Wei Zhang was those were all opportunities for her to just start hammering Suarez. The clinch elbows and uppercuts and left hooks she started to find as this fight wore on. Suarez is frequently running forward, both arms outstretched, and Zhang is just continuing to pull her in while firing off shots that are landing clean. This is one thing to say, by the way, to Suarez's credit. Holy Jesus, does she have a chin?
Yeah.
She got hit with some monster punches. She got hit with punches as bad or worse than the ones that rocked and knocked out Jessica Andrade. No successive flurry like the one that finished that fight, but she was getting shellacked by right hands, elbows, everything. Close range, long range, every place that Zhang was able to fire off a clean shot, she was landing super clean. And Suarez was just tanking him. But she didn't have any connective tissue whatsoever. And everywhere that she was forced to just try to insist on her wrestling, Zhang just beat her up more and more progressively as the rounds went by in those moments.
Yeah. I was also surprised that, I didn't look at the odds. I had no idea Zhang was an underdog.
Yeah.
Because, I started off our discussion last week because I was trying to make the case for Suarez because I felt I had to play some devil's advocate.
Sure.
Because you should, but I didn't realize there were people out there who were just sure, she's just going to win because, if Rose can wrestle her, then, surely Suarez can.
Yep.
But
I was shocked by that as well.
Yeah, it did seem weird. I mean, I can see certain elements of it because, like I said, when we first saw Suarez on the come up, she's one of those people, Khamzat Usman or whatever. It's someone where you look at them and you're just this person's going to be champion one day. Absolutely, 100%. You see their first few fights and you're just yes, they are going to be a champion. But as we said, you can see her not just stagnating, but potentially declining.
Yeah.
Through those later fights. She's not peaking on her way to the title.
Exactly.
She's slowing down and getting worse. And the strengths are becoming less overwhelming and they're being supplemented by, the holes are trying to be patched by something which isn't doing the job, a very rope striking game, which she's incredibly uncomfortable in.
Mm-hmm.
And, the whole Rose out wrestling Weili thing, again, that can be attributed to just two major things. Is that the Weili Zhang team is obviously very good at preparing, and when you think of Rose Namajunas, you don't necessarily think this person's going to shoot takedowns on me.
Yeah, she wasn't prepared for it.
Yeah, and secondly, it was just a timing thing. This is Rose Namajunas is just she's just good at MMA, and she was able to hit takedowns at the appropriate times, so that she didn't necessarily need to be, 6 feet tall and, weighing 200 pounds in the cage or whatever.
That perception has kind of been lost, hasn't it? Since Rose has started to struggle at flyweight and we've seen a lot of uninspired performances. It's easy to lose the truth that, at that time and for a long time before then, Rose Namajunas was exceptionally good at MMA. She was an elite fighter.
Yeah.
And, She just managed to get
and
a
and
super
sometimes it's
close fight with Zhang. Not a convincing win, a close fight with her.
yeah, and sometimes it's not about like the wrestling technique. It's Alexander Gustafsson taking down John Jones when
Right. Yeah.
Daniel Cormier couldn't. Like he just did it at the right time.
Yeah, and Jones never expected it.
And
He took down Cormier too, didn't he? Cormier didn't
Yes.
expect. He just wasn't ready for it. What the hell? This guy's wrestling me?
yeah, and the thing is that Suarez, Zhang could prepare completely for Suarez because there was only one thing that she could offer. They could prepare to her. And, I think Ghost has been out on Twitter, discussing some of the preparation, which is always great to see.
Always fascinating. Yep.
Yeah, they could prepare down to the tactical details of the fact that Suarez slaps her hand before she's going to throw a body kick.
Yeah, they're picking up on
They could prepare
tells
for
and
a
stuff.
complete. Yeah. They could prepare for a complete image, not just an overall game plan, but because Suarez is so limited, and that's what it looked like. It looked like it looked like Zhang had fought Suarez 10 times before Suarez stepped into the cage with her.
Mm-hmm.
That she just knew exactly what was coming.
Yep.
Well, maybe not exactly, because she still got taken down in the first round. But after that was like...
No, once she settled in, she looked
Yeah.
as well prepared as she could have. She, in particular, in fact, countering the kicks, most of her really impactful right hands were when Suarez was throwing an ill-advised kick with no setup. And, you say they specifically prepared for countering those kicks and picking up on them and landing at the right moment. Zhang excelled at doing that.
Yep.
I also want to praise her for the just actual mechanics of her takedown defense. And not even just mechanics, the mental approach she took to takedown defense. 'Cause wrestling is, there's a lot of improvisation required. That's why you can go to a great wrestling school and do a wrestling program. At a certain point, they're just going to call it a scramble. You know what I mean? There's going to be positions where you just have to feel your way through them and flow through them. It's not all about just having a precise technical response or whatever. And what I loved seeing from Zhang is that she never stopped moving her feet when Suarez was trying to force a takedown. She was constantly changing angle or at least maintaining the distance, trying to get her hips back. All of this while fighting for an underhook or a whizzer or fighting to push down the head. It felt a bit like the way Jose Aldo defends takedowns. And you can time it perfectly. You can catch him unawares. You can get in super deep and connect your hands. But the battle is continuing that entire time. And Zhang is moving her feet, changing angles, framing off your head, just doing everything in her power to continue improving the position. And that shit really matters. Most takedowns are not clean blast doubles. There's a battle that's happening after the initial connection. And, I just think of that Peyton Talbot fight against Johnny Barcelos. That was exactly the kind of wrestling know-how and feel that he lacked, that lost him that fight, because Barcelos was consistently able to drag him into a more complicated battle for balance after the initial shot. And Suarez is a great wrestler. She has a lot of ways to finish takedowns, but Daniel Cormier picked up on this, as he often does when something interesting is happening in the wrestling department. He was like, Zhang is defending these takedowns before Suarez even really gets started. That really, really impressed me. She knew she did her homework. She was so good in those moments where Suarez was like one adjustment away from actually converting the shot into a takedown. And Zhang she just never rested. Never stopped fighting for position, never stopped moving her feet. Exceptional wrestling instincts, as well as great technique.
Yeah.
I also loved she
Yeah,
hit
so
that
just-
she hit that counter inside trip on one of those occasions. Like she got so much more comfortable as the fight went on that she was then just finding really clean wrestling counters. So that's the feeling.
Styling on her a bit.
Yeah, that's the feeling that really marks out the truly great dominant performances, isn't it? When that's a GSP thing.
Yep.
Beats you with the game plan to such an extent that by the end of the fight, he's beating you in the stuff you came in prepared to do.
Yep.
Weili Zhang does that.
Yeah. Like this was like watching, those Khabib or Anderson or whatever, performances. Like this was just watching. I'm not saying Weili Zhang is as good as Khabib Nurmagomedov or Anderson Silva or anyone is, in cases anyone is getting, but this was just like watching. It was just watching domination. This was just, I said, it was just absolutely textbook. People should watch this. People should show this to their fighters if they're coming up against a wrestler.
Yeah, a clinical, strategic victory.
Peyton Talbot should watch this.
Totally. Clinical textbook victory. Perfect strategy. Perfect execution. There's not much more to say. Suarez was just completely unprepared for an opponent of Zhang's caliber, and Zhang is never unprepared for an opponent, and that's what that dichotomy looks like in the cage.
Yep. Yeah, I was glad we got to watch this.
Yeah.
Especially as someone, I was sort of I was one of those people who thought Suarez was going to be champion when she first came up. And
we all did.
Yeah, but was still shocked to find out that she was the favorite.
Yeah, we all thought she had the potential. It's just that the reality is that moment, as we said last week, was now 9 years ago.
Yep.
And she's, even if you don't agree that she's declined, you don't think there's any concrete evidence for that, I think it's very fair to say she has not progressed. And that is not what potential realized looks like.
Yes, but you absolutely can say that of Weili Zhang.
100%.
Just an increasingly fully realized grappling game. We've seen it from the offensive standpoint. It was mostly present in her early fights, in her sort of willingness and offensive capability in the clinch and just her ability to out horsepower people. And ever since basically the second Jędrzejczyk fight, she's just been getting better and better there. And then we saw it this time as a defensive and counter wrestling performance, and it was one of the best that we've seen in recent memory.
Yep. Truly made me think of a GSP fight or something like that. I mean, this is when you have a fighter who is smart and professional, they really do their homework and making sure that they're ready for each successive opponent, and they're like a once in a generation athlete. This is what you get. That's a recipe for all time greatness. And I think it's already pretty undeniable that Weili Zhang is firmly in that conversation for this division, and probably firmly in that conversation for all female MMA fighters ever.
Yep. She's
just a consummate professional, consummate problem solver. Which, by the way,
great to see.
This is another great example of the thing that I really do want people to understand why I don't like fights like DDP Strickland or Pennington Pena, or there's a million of these. This was way less competitive as well than DDP Strickland. It had a lot less back and forth. At a certain point, there was no uncertainty whatsoever that Weili Zhang was well on her way to winning, and it was basically a lock. But I like seeing fighters solve problems. I like seeing them come up with solutions to their opponents and forge a clear path to victory. And so I love a performance like this, even if it's one-sided, even if this is also a fight that I'm not going to rewatch this one for the thrill of it. I'll probably enjoy it academically on a second viewing sometime 3-4 years in the future, whatever. But I got something out of this fight that I look for in fighting, which is to be impressed and satisfied by a fighter's ability to just figure out how to cleanly win. So, go Weili Zhang. Great fighter, incredible performance. And in her case, what do you think, Phil, of speaking of champion versus champion matches? This one I'm a lot less cold on. She's been talking about fighting Valentina Shevchenko.
Sure, yeah, make it.
I would love to see that.
I mean, who else is there for her in her division, right?
Exactly. And who is there for Valentina? That I guess for Valentina that would be the problem. There's a couple of actually interesting contenders at flyweight right now. But for Zhang,
not really that interesting though, are they?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Manon Fiorot might be
Fiorot, Macy Barber, I guess.
Not probably not Barber, but Fiorot I think might be a good foil to Valentina's game and a frustrating fighter.
With Weili, it's basically like Vina Jandiroba or Mackenzie Dern.
Yeah. I mean, hey, if
look at this fight and then be like,
yeah.
Do you want to see either of those people fighting her?
Yeah, none of that really does anything for me. So I would be very happy to see Zhang take on Shevchenko, especially because there's a serious prospect that Zhang would out-wrestle Shevchenko.
Yeah.
Which we know is a weakness of hers that just most of her opponents are not actually capable of exploiting, even if they realize it. But Zhang could. You want to see Shevchenko stuck playing guard with no idea how to get back to her feet? I would get something out of that.
Yep.
So, go ahead.
I'd be down to see it. I don't know if it would be the most exciting fight in the world, but it would definitely be a very interesting one.
Yeah, intriguing. I don't expect it to be particularly exciting, but I'm interested. So, let's do it. And let's also do another break. When we come back, I think we're going to drop UFC 312 like it deserves to be dropped, and do a little preview of our upcoming main event for next week's return to the Apex, which, go figure, Phil, they found some middleweights to headline it. Who would have guessed? Hey. Jared Cannonier versus Robocop Rodriguez after this.
Financial support is fantastic, but there are other, even easier ways to support Heavy Hands. Perhaps the best is by spreading the word. We know our fan base. You're all cool, popular people with serious social media presences. You're tastemakers and trendsetters. Okay, there are one or two of you that don't fit that description. You know who you are, but no matter what, you can always help us out by telling folks about the show. You can also give us a positive rating and review on iTunes and Stitcher, things like that. We rely on word of mouth and positive feedback to grow and improve, so thank you very much for your time and your help. Now, back to the show.
All right, welcome back to Heavy Hands. Let's talk about this upcoming Apex main event. Jared Cannonier coming in off of 2 straight losses now, both of them, near finishes, I suppose. He probably should have gotten stopped against Caio Borralho. Taking on personal favorite of mine, a Gregory Robocop Rodriguez. And, I joked about, they found a middleweight main event. This looks like a fun fight. I have no problems with this as a main event at all. Looks like an action matchup. What's not to like?
Yeah, I think this card is probably on the weaker side, but it's not bad as far as Apex goes. There's a lot of blue names.
Yeah, and some of the black names are notable too, like Ismael Bonfim has a black name on Wikipedia, but he's a good fighter. Gabriel Bonfim also on this card. Both do not have Wikipedia pages. Both are good fighters. Yeah.
I mean, pretty much everyone on this card I have heard of.
Yeah.
And some even for good reasons. But yeah, Calvin Gay to the Yusuf Zalal should be cool. You got Angela Hill, you got Jared Gordon. It's alright.
We're measuring against other Apex cards at this point. We have enough context built up to have that be our new dreadfully low bar. And I think this one pretty well clears it, to be honest. I don't think I don't think this is much worse, if worse at all, than the undercard of last week's pay-per-view. So it's fine, really.
Mm-hmm.
But we're just going to talk about Cannonier Rodriguez, I think, and unless we got a couple other quick thoughts on these other fights. Let's talk about Jared Cannonier first, because Cannonier has for quite a long time now been a fighter. You always end up being like impressed by him in a way that kind of surprises you. You're like, you know what? Jared Cannonier actually came up with some cool ideas, and and yet, I mean, what is it other than just being a weird guy who can't stick to a game plan that has kept Jared Cannonier from actually becoming a convincing contender? Because I think he's now on the way out. I mean, I think he's now on the decline. But the story of his career at middleweight is being quite impressive the whole time, and you constantly find yourself underestimating him, and he seems to overperform, and yet it never really felt like Jared Cannonier was actually gonna get there, and now it seems certain that he won't.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's primarily that he's, as you kind of, it's not just his inability to stick to a game plan, it's just that, like, he developed into, like, a more technical style, like, quite late in life.
Mm-hmm.
And he hasn't really been able to build much subtlety into that game.
Yeah, it's not even that he can't stick to game plans. He really struggles to formulate a game plan.
Yeah.
Doesn't really seem to have a process that he applies to fights in general.
Yeah. So he's basically, like, I mean, again, to his credit, he is one of the fighters who has genuinely, like, evolved over time. And, as a whole, he's impressed me a lot with his career evolution.
Totally.
Including, the points where I thought that he was doing really stupid things, where I was like, why are you moving down to a weight class where people are actually moderately good at stuff when you could just stay at, like, heavyweight?
Yeah.
Or even heavyweight. And I still actually don't know what the counter to that hypothetical looks like. Maybe if you stayed at light heavyweight, you just would have got a title shot.
Possibly, yeah.
But yeah, so essentially he is someone who is going around throwing relatively, like, coordinated, coherent straight shots without much to back it up in terms of sort of defense or nuance. And he's not very quick, which means that now that his chin's starting to go, I think.
Yeah.
He is starting to get hurt in exchanges more than he used to. And he can still be just outflanked by people who are fast against people who are slow-footed. Like, for example, Sean Strickland. He was able to just kind of, again, another one of these people who's just obviously immensely mentally durable.
Mm-hmm.
He was simply not shaken by Strickland's, insistence on the pocket. It did not mean anything to Jared Cannonier because he cannot be mentally shaken. As shown by his complete dismissal and destruction of Anderson Silva, the mind games don't work on him.
Yeah.
He's protected by crystals.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's just kind of slow, and he doesn't do that many things.
I don't even know if it's that he's slow. I think Cannonier is actually, even at this stage of his career, quite.
I think he has hand speed, but I think again that's just a marker of him being like quite a good athlete who was like trained himself and been trained quite smartly.
Yeah, I was going to say
it's just.
Well, yeah, go on, please.
I think it's just, it was late enough. It's just late enough in life that he's just coming up against the limits of his ability to learn and his body's ability to, like, recover.
Yeah, he did. He really did pick it all up quite late. I mean, what is he? Is he like 38 now? Older than that, like possibly? That. I think he's pretty quick. I think it's similar to the Drekus thing.
He's 40.
40. Yeah, crazy. I was going to say, I'm pretty sure he was like 36 when he moved to middleweight. I think it's a bit like the Drekus thing. I think mechanically and conceptually he slows himself down. But he's actually quite explosive and quick. His raw hand speed, is up there. And for Cannonier, maybe this is an interesting way to think about him. What separates him from the likes of Drekus? Because in most respects, he is a much better technician, cleaner puncher. But like Drekus, though Drekus has yet to pay for it the way Cannonier has started to pay for it increasingly, I think the footwork is a major downfall of Cannonier's game.
Mm-hmm.
Because he just does the wrong thing. Exiting the pocket, or when he's driven back, after he throws, when he tries to follow up, his footwork is not ordered. He does not follow a rule where his feet are supposed to be this distance apart and he's supposed to be at this angle relative to his opponent, and that's how he knows he's safe and secure. Like, he just kind of weaves around back and forth in front of people. Like, Cannonier's fight with Nasruddin Imavov, I think, was a particularly good. Also, the fight with Bahalyo, a particularly good demonstration of this, that he is doing lots of lateral movement, but somehow every time he tries to attack, it feels like he's trying to storm the gates. It feels like he's trying to break down the front door. Because all this lateral movement is not actually like connected to a direct threat. He squares himself up, or he takes a step back with the wrong foot and crosses his feet. And then there's still a huge tell when he then tries to come in on the so-called angle he has just achieved. And against Imavov, he literally just got knocked out doing this. Like, tried to storm in off of a bunch of essentially useless lateral movement and just ran directly into a straight shot, which is not the kind of thing that should happen if you're moving laterally and coming in on angles, There's a real technical failing, I think, in Cannonier's footwork. And maybe he is as mentally resilient as Drekus or comparable, but I don't think he has the mental fortitude, the right kind of mental fortitude to, like, just recognize that he needs to change the tone of the fight. Cannonier is always in the weeds. He is a very, very tactical fighter, and I think he really struggles.
I think he wants to be a good technical fighter, and he believes that he is a good technical fighter.
Yeah. So he doesn't just want to go out there and do...
I think that Drekus, one of the things that makes him effective is that and that will probably be his downfall eventually, is that he's completely shameless.
He's willing to make mistakes. He's willing to do embarrassing, stupid stuff to win.
Yeah. He's constantly. He's both physically able to withstand just, flinging himself onto his own face repeatedly.
Mm-hmm.
And also, mentally able to withstand it. And, from a cardio as well as like a durability perspective, he's just able to do incredibly high effort things.
Yeah.
Repeatedly, over and over again.
Yeah.
And,
Cannonier's not really willing to throw.
Cannonier definitely believes in this evolution of himself as a good striker.
The irony is that lacking that drive and that aggressive determination, it gives the opponents a lot more comfortable opportunities to exploit the real technical problems in his game and to punish him for his lazy footwork and everything. Not even lazy, just again disordered. His footwork is just all over the place. Like, MMA coaches,
and also,
please,
you would definitely rather be in Cannonier's position as you are, starting to fade out of your physical prime.
Oh,
You'd
yeah,
rather have a technical base to fall back on at this point.
If Drekus makes a significant physical decline at any point, the whole ship is going to sink.
Immediately toast.
Yeah.
Yes.
The whole game is not going to work because it's suddenly all those falls. It just becomes not only easier to exploit them, but the effects of them being exploited becomes worse. But yeah, that's, I guess, the irony is that Cannoneer is a better technician, a more thoughtful technician than Drekus. He is every bit as, like, tactically engaged when he's fighting somebody and trying to solve problems and come up with new combinations and come up with counters. And, you know, he's really in the tactical battle, but he's not willing to just, like, overwhelm people. He's not willing to just leverage his raw physicality, to break people like Drekus does. And the result is that he ends up spending a lot of time at a range where he is technically deficient and puts himself in awkward positions, and, you know, he can't figure out the correct way to get in, whereas that's never a problem Drekus runs up against, you know? He's gonna get in. Maybe you could punish him for it, but he's just gonna force his way into range to start fighting you. Cannoneer doesn't really do that. So, if there is a physical decline, which there probably should be going on alongside this, even if it's just in the durability, those mistakes are just compounding now. Having said all that, Gregory Rodriguez is an extremely volatile fighter.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely has the power and the pressure fighting process to just shred holes in Jared Cannoneer's game. But he dies by the sword about as often as he lives by it. So, very much a fight where I think Cannoneer has a chance for things to go horribly and just get a one-shot knockout win. I mean, fuck, the shots he was finding on Kyle Bahalio late in their 5-round war, they would have knocked out a lot of other middleweights, and certainly one as susceptible to being hurt as Gregory Rodriguez. The interesting angle, I think, for this is the fact that we have seen Rodriguez leaning much more into his wrestling, and not just that, leaning into trying to secure dominant positions off of his takedowns. Because he's such a gung-ho action fighter, that mindset used to bleed into every single part of his game, so that he would hit a beautiful, perfectly timed takedown on somebody and teleport to their back and then give up the position 20 seconds later when the choke didn't present itself and he tried another transition. That's what's changed about Gregory Rodriguez, is that when he gets somebody down or even just connects with somebody in a clinch, he is much more interested in maintaining that position and trying to win from there, rather than just trying to finish from every possible position at every moment. Not really a historical weakness of Jared Cannoneer's, at least at middleweight.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Having said that, the middleweight run is not marked by a lot of wrestlers.
It rarely is.
Right?
They pretty much get to fight each other.
He certainly, his defensive wrestling held up, way back in 2019 when he fought Jack Hermanson. But this was also a fight where he was, Hermanson was vastly overpowered in addition to whatever wrestling technique Cannoneer had gained. Since then, Derek Brunson, who did take him down 3 times and then imploded as he's wont to do. Nasruddin Imavov got him down twice. But these are all mostly fighters who are like somewhat interested in wrestling. They're not fighters who tend to dominate a fight with their wrestling. And Gregory Rodriguez is now interested in doing that when he can. So it is a pretty wide open question to me just how solid Cannoneer's takedown defense will actually prove to be.
Yeah. Yeah, I find this one... I mean, if you'd made this fight a few years ago, 2 years ago, I would have just been like, Cannoneer all day. It's just a straightforward dynamism check. And I'm still not sure whether that isn't the question, the side that I'm going to sort of take in the end. Because the people that Rodriguez has been beating lately have mostly been, like, it's been fairly predictable outcomes, right?
Yeah.
It's people who just can't meet him head to head in terms of raw firepower. Like Brad Tavares.
Yeah.
We should have included that in the old Darren Elkins, Michael Johnson award for predictable outcomes, because that was Tavares just trying to reinsert himself into the fight, and Rodriguez just putting his foot on the gas and just blowing him out the water.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, he still comes in with his head bolt upright, completely unmoving, and as you said, Cannonier still has power and hand speed, and a complete lack of fear. He's the kind of person where, when Rodriguez comes in, sort of relying on his combinations to scare off the opponent from throwing it back, Cannonier will probably just look at him and throw the hardest punch that he can, like, in his face.
Yeah, Cannonier will also, defend and counter. Like, it's not just collisions.
Yes, I was going to say, Cannonier actually does have some defense as well in the pocket.
He's very attentive, and he will slip shots and come back with a really fast and really scary straight right-hand counter, which tends to be a really effective shot for him. It was even effective against Caio Borralho, who just could not be put off.
Also, we were talking about how old Cannonier is. Do you know how old Rodriguez is?
37.
Top of your head? He's 32.
Oh, yeah. He's one of those guys who's way younger than he looks.
Yeah, right? He looks like he's... like, to be honest, they're going to get in there. He is definitely going to look like the older man. Like, at least facially.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, he's actually... I mean, he's 11 years into his MMA career, but he's actually, like, by far the younger man. So... I don't know. It does feel like one of those ones where should Robocop be able to sort of get on top of, and in a not just in a like wrestling sense, but in a just a sense of momentum.
Mm-hmm.
He should be able to kind of push him out of the fight. But I kind of feel like this might be one of the ones which is good for Cannonier.
Yeah, I'm kind of getting that
this
feeling.
This is one of the kind of fights that allows him to thrive, because he's not going to be asked to close distance on his own terms. He's not going to have his footwork exposed. He's going to have someone run up to him and start a punching exchange.
Yeah. That's kind of how I'm feeling, too.
He's quite good at that.
Yeah, the thing with Rodriguez is he does come in with his head bolt upright. He has defense and counters. Rodriguez is more than capable of slipping shots and firing back. And even, connecting several bits of head movement together. But he's one of these fighters, very common in MMA, who just stops thinking about defense. He's single-minded. That's why he gets knocked out, like, in the process of finishing people. He loses all sight of the danger if he gets a little taste of momentum or initiative. I think he's probably going to get to pressure Cannonier. And as long as it's on the feet, I think there's a very good chance of, he's probably going to hurt Cannonier, but he's probably going to get hurt in return. And then it becomes a question of...
Despite Cannonier having gotten, finished recently, I trust his durability a lot more than I trust Rodriguez's.
I mean, shit, look at those finishes. Look at the accumulation of damage these finishes are taking. Again, he should have been stopped by Caio Borralho for his own good, but he wasn't. He managed to take a genuine KO shot. It would have knocked him out in boxing, because I doubt he could have gotten to his feet in time. But he managed to stay conscious, to hang on, to survive. He remains a very durable fighter, even if he's not as tough as he once was. So it really just comes down to what effect does Rodriguez's wrestling game have on Cannonier. And Rodriguez is an extremely good, powerful wrestler. I said in the Weili Zhang breakdown that most takedowns are not just like clean blast doubles. lot of Gregory Rodriguez's takedowns are clean takedowns. One attack, perfectly timed, very powerful, boom, you're off your feet. But I don't know. I just haven't seen Cannonier tested by that enough. I've seen him have, kicks caught, but most of these people who even can get him down, they're not particularly interested in staying there. I don't know. It's just hard for me to trust Rodriguez against a tough puncher of any kind.
Yep, basically. This feels a lot like Izzy Imavov in that I'm like, I have to pick the guy who's just proven at a much higher level.
Yeah.
But the guy at much higher level has been showing definite signs of wear and tear. And if he loses this fight, I am, very much going to say that he is, he is pretty much done as a relevant contender.
Yeah.
Or he's done at the level I thought he was at. As Izzy is done as a championship force and Cannonier is done as a gatekeeper.
Done as an elite gatekeeper. He'll probably still knock a few prospects out of the top 15 as long as he continues to fight. But I don't know. I would consider this one kind of a coin flip just because I expect it to be violent and action-packed, at least in spots. And I know that both of these guys are more than capable of getting caught with something they do not see coming at all. And they're both huge punchers.
Yep.
So, should be awesome. Do not feel confident about a pick. And I think I'm going to default to the experience advantage for Cannonier.
Yeah. I mean, 8 years in terms of age in a physical matchup is definitely significant.
Yeah, but Cannonier is
40 and 32 is a lot.
But Cannonier is not a normal 40-year-old. He is not a normal 40-year-old.
Cannonier has looked,
he's a Yoel
relatively
Romero.
Uncrackable in that sense, but I also wouldn't be surprised if he suddenly just starts falling out of these fights. And you also don't know what it does to his what it does to his confidence to start losing these fights like this.
True.
Because he could have been like, oh, the Izzy fight I got outpointed. He's not getting outpointed anymore.
Yeah. He's getting beaten in knockdown, drag out brawls.
Yep.
Yeah. I'll pick him.
Interesting one. It should be fun.
Oh, it will be fun. I mean, I don't see, even if Rodriguez dominates Cannonier with his wrestling, it's still going to be, he's going to try to smash him from top position and choke his ass out. It's not going to be boring.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a terrible looking card, all things considered. So hopefully we'll have some good stuff to talk about next week. We will, of course, also be looking ahead to another travel fight night card. This one, Henry Cejudo versus Song Yadong. Brendan Allen versus Fluffy Hernandez. Long John Silva versus Melsik Bagdasarian. Some good stuff. Edson Barboza, Steve Garcia. Can old man Edson do it again? Probably. Yeah, there's some good stuff there. So we'll have some fun fights to talk to you about next week. I'll just close this one out by saying that Duplessis Strickland 2 did not need to happen, and Weili Zhang is possibly the best female fighter ever. That's what we learned.
Yay.
All right. Well, I know you've got some just thrilling comments and whatnot. You can, of course, leave those in the YouTube comments, Heavy Hands on YouTube, but you can hit us up on social media too. You might have some luck even if you contact Phil. At Boxing Bush, that's me on Twitter. At Evil Greg Jackson, that's Phil. At King Typo on Blue Sky. I'm telling you, I have hardly looked at either of these in like 2 months now, and it's been great. It's been really great. So, sorry if I don't get back to you immediately, if you do reach out to us there, but hey, I'm living my life. Oh, and check out the Patreon as well. We had a little bonus episode that went up last week. Might still be interesting to you after the fact. In fact, it should be, because we mostly recapped the undercard bouts from Adesanya Imavov. And we'll be back to talk to you about more fights next week. Until then, If you came here today for the finer points of face punching, you came to the right place. This has been Heavy Hands.